On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, it is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Jacob Winans and myself will be discussing the 5-3 win for the Florida Panthers over the Arizona Coyotes right before going on a long 4-game road trip out. And we're going to discuss the individual performances of the game, especially that fourth line. We're going to be discussing this and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, January 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also follow the other shows on the Locked On AHL network, including Locked On AHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and if you want everything in relation to the World Juniors, especially with Ludwig Janssen, who's been performing so well for Team Sweden, you could catch Heidi Kalakash over at Locked On NHL Prospects. And don't forget to send in your screenshot of your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel and your 5-star rating. Send in those screenshots at LO_FLA Panthers over DM, or email it to me at lockedonflapanthers@gmail.com for your chance to win 2 free tickets to the next Florida Panthers home game between them and the Vancouver Canucks on Saturday, January 14th. So the Florida Panthers on this second game of their 2-game homestand. Of course, it was a bummer for them to drop this first game against the New York Rangers after playing the last 2 periods fairly well. Paul Maurice spoke about it actually this morning in Morning Skate, saying if they play like they did in the last 2 periods of their game against New York, that they'll find themselves on the winning end very often. Of course, this is a team that still has to play 650 to 700 hockey the rest of the way to try to qualify for the postseason. And the Panthers tonight just went ahead early, let the Coyotes back in it, 2-2, and go up 3-2, tied 3-3, and then the Panthers scored the last 2 in order to come out with a win. And this will be a great time to bring in my guest on the show. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And Jacob, welcome back to the show. Great to have you, and great to also be chatting with you as I was in person, and I was talking to you pre-recording that I'm pretty jacked up as I am in a hockey setting once again. Just a feeling that I don't always get with watching these games on TV. So I want to say thank you for joining me as I'm doing this post-game show from the press box.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, our frequent listeners know that both of us are located in Orlando, so we don't always get to get to the arena for the game. So it's always a nice treat when we're able to do that. Myself, I was able to go to a couple games so far this year, undefeated this season when I'm in the building, and now you got to win in the building. So I think maybe the secret to their success is having one of us there. To try to make that happen a little more often.
Yeah, and I'm 2-0 when the Panthers are there, because the last game I attended was the home opener against the Philadelphia Flyers. So great to travel down here for the New Year, spend some time around the city as well, and just cover a game while I'm down here as well. So it's always great to be back home. But let's really start with this game where even though the Panthers were up 1-0 very early on, and of course Barkov with just a beautiful feed off Matthew Tkachuk with Gus Forsling's point shot being rebounded. The the Panthers, they weren't really generating a lot of shots off the cycle. If the Panthers weren't getting their chances off the rush, they weren't generating shots on goal. And really, this wasn't. Thankfully for the Panthers, this wasn't too much of self-inflicted wounds. This was a really mostly mistake-free game as far as like penalties. Even though they did give up a power play goal to the Arizona Coyotes, which it's still an issue. Paul Maurice said he's more concerned about the PK than he is about the power play. He said he's not concerned about the man advantage, but early on, the Panthers were just trying to be a little too cute with their drop passes in the neutral zone and even in their own zone that was causing so many turnovers. And the Coyotes were just getting a whole bunch of offensive zone time in the Panthers zone. And really the Panthers, if it wasn't off the rush really early on, they weren't generating chances. But thankfully for the fourth line, they were consistently on the forecheck. That Lomberg-Staal-Smith line, as Giovanni Smith was recalled. But man, it was really that fourth line that set the tone, and it was thankfully they were able to cycle the puck later on in the game.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the same things you're talking about there. The Panthers it was a lot of one and done early in the game. A lot of rush chances, but not so much coming off the cycle. And it wasn't so much that they weren't getting the zone time. It's just they were kept to the perimeter so much. The shots just weren't getting to the net. It was a lot of cycling, a lot of passing, but not really any shots. I know there was one shift in particular. It was Barkov, Verhaeghe, and Tkachuk in the zone. I think at the time the Panthers were up 2-0, looking to maybe get a third goal and really kind of put the game out of reach early. And they cycled the puck for probably over a minute, but the puck never got to the net. So that's been a bit of a problem. We do need to have someone pulling the trigger. Cycling the puck is great. You want to pin the guys in their own zone and wear their legs out, but at some point the puck has to get to the net and at least create a chance off of it. They only had around nine or 10 shots almost halfway through the game. You're going to have a little bit more shot volume. I'm all for taking quality shots, but you need to have a little more volume there as well. But we're in a win. You don't want to focus too much on the negatives, and bringing up a positive is definitely that fourth line. That fourth line tonight was absolutely incredible. I thought Giovanni Smith brought an element of grit and toughness that fourth line was really missing. For a guy his size, he moves extremely well as far as straight line speed, and he knows his role. He goes out there, he throws a big hit, gets the puck out of the zone, and immediately makes a dash straight to the crease. Gets right in front of Veggie in the crease, and he ends up creating a screen that allows Eric Staal to get that first goal. That goal was he doesn't end up on the score sheet for it, but he certainly played a big part in scoring that goal. And it's very much with that fourth line. The guys know their role, you know what they're out there to do. It's to forecheck, it's to pin the other team in their zone, and it's to generate some of those greasy ones. And that's really what they were able to produce tonight. It was good to see Eric Staal rewarded twice.
Yeah, and just looking at the final numbers as far as natural stat trick, a Corsi for 75%, 18 shot attempts to the opposition 6, shots 4, 12-4 with that line of 8 minutes and 7 seconds of total time on ice at 5-on-5. So that line was just getting going, the best line of the night, and it also resulted in the second goal by that same line, which was the third goal the fourth goal of the game. The puck wasn't even on Lomberg's stick for even a second, and then he finds Eric Staal right in the slot to make it 4-3 at the time. And Paul Maurice had a very interesting comment about just taking a year off for Eric Staal. First goal was actually Staal on Staal, but of course the rest of the forwards helped with the forecheck there. But even on that second goal, and spoke about how it was a struggle to cover his the line that Eric Staal was on in Montreal when Paul Maurice was a head coach of the Winnipeg Jets in their playoff series, which Winnipeg got swept. Of course, we remember what happened in Game 1 with Mark Scheifele on Jake Evans, which was the big momentum killer for them, but had to struggle with him, that line, along with Joe Armia as well. So just and listen, Eric Staal, 12 points in the last 16 games, 6 goals and 6 assists, and we were all wondering at the time. We remember, and listen, there's receipts on Twitter about what is Bill Zito doing as far as like Eric Staal being on this fourth line, of course, after the PTO. But now look at this production, and of course having 2 speedsters in Smith and Lomberg, that's truly helping them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely one of the ones who is not exactly in favor of Eric Staal getting a bunch of ice time. I thought there were better options. And Eric Staal would probably be the first one to tell you it took him a long time to get going this year. He got off to a really slow start, and for a lot of games there, he was kind of a negative asset. He wasn't really helping on the score sheet. His main thing that really kept him even in the lineup was his penalty killing and his faceoff. And it's a good thing that he was able to stay in the lineup and get his legs going, because it seems like he's now found his rhythm. This is a guy he's definitely not what he used to be. He's a future Hall of Fame player. He's checked every box in the NHL that you can check as far as production and longevity. But it speaks a lot to his credit that he's able to transition to a fourth line role, given that he spent most of his career as a franchise player. He has all kinds of humility. He's humble. He comes to work, and he's accepted his role on the fourth line, and now he's thriving in it. He's stepped up. He's provided some offense that honestly most fourth line centers are not giving you 12 points in 16 games. The Panthers are fortunate to have that, and he's now proving his worth. I think it was important to get him some speedsters on his line. I don't think you see this production with Staal if he's still with Hornquist. Not a knock on Hornquist necessarily. It's just that's 2 guys who aren't exactly the fastest players in the game anymore. 2 guys that are a bit older. Eric Staal he clearly needed an injection of speed and youth on his wings. And it's definitely worked out. You give him some speed to make up for what he now lacks in foot speed, and he's able to use his veteran smarts, his savvy, his puck cycling. It's now creating a pretty good blend of productivity with some speedsters on his wing.
Yeah, and definitely a guy who's been there, done that type of guy. He's just always knows when to be in a certain place, and of course, the teammates trust him to always be there. But in segment number 2, we are going to be discussing more of Matthew Tkachuk and of course the goaltender Spencer Knight, as they were just outstanding in this game as well for the Panthers, resulting in this 5-3 win over the Arizona Coyotes. But first, we're going to tell you all about Bet Online. And Bet Online is still your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and hockey. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Back on this second segment of this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Got Jacob Winans here on the show to break down this 5-3 win for the Panthers over the Desert Dogs. And we spoke about the Staal line, especially when even though the Panthers got the first goal and it was the fourth line getting the tone. But man, Matthew Tkachuk and Spencer Knight especially for this one, with especially I want to really highlight the power play goal for most importantly. It was towards the end of the second period where Spencer caught the Arizona Coyotes on a line change, uses a stretch pass to get it to Sam Reinhart, and just them going a little bit of a 2-on-1 to and as Matthew Tkachuk is driving to the net, gets it past Karel Vejmelka, and just to make it 5-3 at the time, and just incredible hockey IQ play by Spencer Knight. His first point as in the NHL was asked after the game about whether he was going to keep the puck or not, and he says he doesn't mind about getting it. He said Matthew Tkachuk can keep it, and that was actually Matthew Tkachuk's also first hat trick since game one of the Battle of Alberta. Something we spoke earlier in this on the show about. But how great was Spencer Knight, Jacob? Because I'm just in awe about how he adjusted especially after the second goal given up, which is really the only bad goal that he gave up on the day.
Yeah, obviously the Clayton Keller goal is probably one he'd like to have back. Not a whole lot he could do on the goal by Big Nick Bjugstad, a former Panther, one of my all-time favorite, one of my favorite players to ever put on the Panther uniform. So it's always good to see him get a goal. Kind of a former Panther affair tonight. Former junior Panther Jacob Chikrin gets the goal. Former Panther Nick Bjugstad gets the goal. So thought that was interesting. But Spencer Knight definitely bounced back after giving up those two goals that came not too far apart in the second period. He really slammed the door from that point on. He came up huge in the third period when he wasn't facing a ton of shots. Then all of a sudden, Arizona is pushing hard to get back in the game. He starts facing a flurry. He's very good at making a save, at knowing when to kill the play, knowing when to freeze it, and knowing when to play it. That's something you don't really see too much in a young goaltender. That's something that usually comes with experience and age. But he's very good at knowing when to keep that puck moving and when to kill the momentum, stop the play, and put an end to it. And you saw that at the end of the game. The Panthers are scrambling a little bit, and he gets a chance to make a glove save. Absolutely shuts the play down, and it killed the whole shift for the Coyotes. But definitely, what I want to talk about with Spencer Knight tonight is not necessarily just the saves he's making. He's a goalie. He's paid to tend the goal. We know that he's there to make saves, but that second period, as we know, that's the long change period. So any line change, you have to go to the opposite end of the ice to get to the bench. Oftentimes on a power play, you'll see goalies come out and play the puck, but they'll usually just hold it and drop it to a defenseman in the zone so they can get the quick stretch pass to get back in the zone. Not too many goalies have the stick handling ability to do it themselves. And Spencer Knight, we see him flash the stick handling all the time. But tonight he put a perfect stretch pass back up the ice, beats the Coyotes line change, and it sets up that Sam Reinhart pass to Matthew Tkachuk. That is an excellent play. It's not going to make the highlight reels. It's not going to be talked about that much because at the end of the day, yes, it's a secondary assist. But that is a veteran play from a really young goalie, and that is a difficult pass to make. It's a very difficult pass to make, and he put it on a pinpoint right to Sam Reinhart's tape, and it got the Panthers the goal they needed to really put that game out of reach. So Spencer Knight came up huge, both in the goal, but also on the score sheet, actually providing a really good pass to get the Panthers another goal on the board. I thought he was spectacular.
Absolutely, and you just think about the illness that he went through, and then the last two games that he started at Boston, where really that loss was mostly on Spencer Knight, the Boston game, and then the Carolina game last Friday, just the PK letting him down. You couldn't put that game on Spencer Knight really at all, and then the fourth goal was as the power play ended. So basically four power play goals with 3 actually being recorded. So just a tough stretch for Spencer Knight as of late. But then this one, just for the night, no pun intended, 917 save percentage. I know single game save percentage isn't the be all end all, but still a lot of shot volumes. There was a point in time where the shots was 18-9 in favor of Arizona, which the Florida Panthers were able to turn that around towards the second half of the second period, which that period resulted in a 20-10 shot on goal advantage for Florida, which, they were able to settle down, and Spencer Knight really kept the Panthers in it. And of course, when they brought out the extra skater as well, Spencer Knight closed the door when needed. And he also spoke about after the game how he's not really looking at a run. He's more looking at just little bits at a time. And for someone to have that kind of mentality for someone who's 21, 22 years old as well, it's just incredible to see. But I also, of course, Matthew Tkachuk as well. Let's go to Matthew Tkachuk and just talk about how 4th career hat trick, 3 in the regular season, 1 in the postseason, 20 goals on the season, and we're not even at the halfway point as far as games. And I got an opportunity to ask him about how is he feeling about his individual play with 20 goals, on pace to have another 40-goal season, and despite not getting wins. And he even says himself, I need to get better. I'm like, you need to get better. Like, you're already just doing so much for this team. And even Paul Maurice was asked about that. It's like, oh, the level that this guy can get to, even if he is better than what he's already doing.
Yeah, he's the ultimate competitor on this team, and he's such a welcome addition in that locker room, because no matter what his individual stats look like, this is a guy who's about wins. And I thought his comments post game were really refreshing, because he really does tell it how it is. He spoke about this upcoming road trip. He said our season is on the line. That's the reality of the situation. And a lot of times you'll hear players give the cliche answers, one game at a time, or we're not looking at the standings. Tkachuk is not about that at all. He's straight up said our season's on the line. Honestly, the players really need to hear that. They need to have a guy on the team who's taking it that seriously. Like, this upcoming road trip is our season, so come ready to play. And that's what Tkachuk is about. I think his mentality is great, and the thing about that is it's so much easier to appreciate those comments. It's so much easier to follow him as a leader when he backs it up, and it's not just him saying it, but he says these things and then he leads the team on the ice. He proves it every game. Another 4-point night tonight, a hat trick. He gets all his goals almost from the same area. He's right in front of the net. He's not afraid to take a hit. He gets the greasy ones. He puts his body on the line. And then my favorite thing tonight was not his 3 goals. It was not his assist. It was Sasha Barkov gets hit from behind, and Tkachuk comes flying in and immediately goes after Shane Gostisbehere, who, by the way, not a dirty player. Definitely probably was not intentional. It's just reckless. But Tkachuk, he doesn't care. You hit the captain from behind, you're going to answer to Tkachuk, whether Tkachuk is a superstar player, the highest scorer on the team, and he's not afraid to get into the dirty areas and drop the mitts with anybody if they touch the captain. I think that speaks volumes. So I was really impressed with Tkachuk's game tonight all around. On the score sheet, as a leader, his post-game comments, his on the ice willingness to stand up for the captain, it's the complete package. And I really don't even want to think about where the Panthers would be if not for Tkachuk this season, because he has been spectacular. He's been as advertised, without a doubt.
Yeah, and South Florida native Shane Gostisbehere on that hit from Barkov, which a little space between him and the boards, and it wasn't even called. And him and Gudas were both sent to the box, and it along with Gostisbehere on that one, and the Panthers ended up getting a penalty, which I didn't quite understand. Barkov was also hooked by Clayton Keller as well in the Yote zone. I didn't understand that one as well, but hey, we're not going to complain too much after a win. And great that Matthew Tkachuk also stands up for the captain, like one of your best players standing up for another one of your best players. It's a brotherhood, and thankfully we see, based on their actions on the ice, that they are legitimately there for each other. But in segment number 3, we are going to be discussing a little bit of a topic that is bigger than hockey and bigger than sports, and an event that happened this week in the world of sports that we think that we have a need to discuss. So Jacob and I are going to discuss that here next on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
third and final segment here on this Wednesday, January 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. And this is a topic that I really wanted to talk about because it's even though this didn't happen in the sport of hockey, these kind of things do happen in a sport where there's a lot of contact. And the fact that these are athletes that put their lives at risk. And if you've been living under a rock, what happened was on Monday Night Football between the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals, Damar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills went to go make a tackle on a Bengals player, T. Higgins, and got up for a little bit and just flat out collapsed on the field. And we've seen these situations in hockey as well. Just right before the pandemic hit, Jay Bouwmeester just collapsed on the Blues bench against the Anaheim Ducks, and the game was called within 20 minutes. In this situation in the NFL, the game was called within an hour, and this was a game that had many playoff implications in the AFC. And of course, Chris Pronger as well went through something like this as well. One of the greatest defensemen in the 90s that many fans got to witness. And I want to get your thoughts on just because the Panthers have 2 days off. We have plenty of time to as well preview their game against the Detroit Red Wings and the rest of the road trip. So I think with this being so recent, Jacob, I think this is really just something to talk about as far as something that's just bigger than sports, about how we view these athletes and how the bosses in these big sports leagues view these athletes as well.
Yeah, I want to start first and foremost before we get into any of this conversation in just extending complete thoughts and prayers, and that's such an overused phrase, but really like thoughts and prayers to Damar Hamlin and his family, because they do really need it right now, and it's a miracle and a blessing that Damar Hamlin is still with us after the events of last night. I know he's still in critical condition, and they're still hoping for more improvement, but it's a blessing that he's still here and that his family is by his side, and that's really all you can ask for in this situation. So I really do hope he pulls through, and football and him continuing his career and whatever else after that is secondary, just to him being able to pull through and have a quality life. So and that's priority number one, of course. Beyond that, I think this is a really, really important reminder that all of this, it's all a game. It's a sport. It's for entertainment, and I think last night was a really painful reminder to fans that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter all that much, especially when it comes to a situation where it is truly life and death. And especially in a sport like football, a sport like hockey, these are sports where guys are quite literally putting their lives on the line because the slightest freak accident, there's so much physicality, so much speed, so much violence. The slightest freak accident, it can result in someone's life being altered or very nearly ended, like last night. So it's a reminder that when you're trash talking, or when you're getting too angry or too involved, or when rivalries spill over, it's a good reminder to know that this is still just a game. And that's what I really took from it, especially given the massive playoff implications of that game yesterday. It's huge. It was for the number one seed, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And I think the game being canceled is a good indication of that. It really just does not matter when it comes to the life of a player. And it's important for us to look at these players as human beings, not just as players, not just as members of the team playing a sport. These are still human beings. They're sons, their brothers, their husbands, their family members. it goes beyond the sport. So yeah, it's really difficult to talk about. I was shaken up just watching it on TV. I can't imagine what his family was going through, what the fans were going through, what his teammates were going through. Some of the images from the game from his teammates were very hard to watch. It really brought back memories of 2007. I was just 7 years old, but I remember watching the game, Panthers against the Buffalo Sabres in Buffalo, and the incident with Richard Zednick having his neck sliced with Olli Jokinen's skate. Very similar situation where we didn't know. Like we were watching that game, we saw the players shaken up, and you just know someone's life is at risk, and you just don't know the outcome of that. It really brought back a lot of memories of that. A lot of memories of Jay Bouwmeester, a few other hockey incidents. Chris Pronger is another one, a similar blunt force accident that knocked his heart out of rhythm, and he was blessed to come back and play several more years in his Hall of Fame career. It's just these incidents are scary. They're rare, but when they happen, they're very scary, and it's important to take those reminders that this is just a game and these are human beings.
And I might come to games in person, and I might be able to talk to players and coaches in person as well. But at the end of the day, I'm still a fan of sports as well. And one of my pet peeves, and well, actually, before I get to my pet peeves, I still go watch games at bars and be in community with people, just regular fans. And one of my biggest pet peeves is whenever I'm with a group of people watching a game, whether it's football, whether it's hockey, and then you hear fans saying, break his legs, go after him, or when they're on the floor when they're on the ground or on the ice and they're or have an injury and people are yelling at the TV saying, get up, he's faking, or it's not that bad. Like that is one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to just sports fandom in general. And the fact that, and next time you see an injured player, regardless of sport, please, for the love of God, put yourself in that position of getting some consistent dings, whether that's to the head or to the knee, for a possibility of multiple ligaments being teared as well, cracked ribs. And of course, we've spoken so much about hockey culture, about if you get a little bit of a ding to just get right back up and play. And of course, there's a lot of undisclosed injuries in hockey, of course. It's the least transparent of the four major sports when it comes to injuries. But still, whenever I want you guys as fans to try to be more, to put more of the human side of things to these people, even if it's something minor. It doesn't have to be what happened to Damar Hamlin for you to just be like, okay, this is a person going through an injury. Let's think about them. And of course, there's so many different players on a team. And of course, different players bring different things to the table, of course. But that person is still part of a big unit that's just trying to put together one goal. And when it's a family member, they see these people as family. And when one person goes down, it's hard for these people.
It's hard to put it any better than that. I mean, just some added perspective. I mean, you grew up an athlete. You played sports all through high school. I'm an athlete myself. I've played just about every sport there is to play. I played basketball up to the college level. I'm sure you've dealt with your fair share of injuries. I know I have as well. Thank God nothing so major that it's life altering, but I promise you, players who are injured, they don't want to be injured. No one ever wants to sit out games. Guys who are injured feel like they're letting their team down. Guys who are injured are constantly rehabbing behind the scenes trying to get back. At the professional rank, it is even more so like that than the levels that we have played at. It's important to remember that, because these are human beings, and you have to separate the sport from the human being in these cases. Whether it's a minor injury, a major injury, or something life threatening, like what happened to Damar Hamlin, it shouldn't take a life threatening injury on the field for people to humanize these players. So many of the people that are offering their thoughts, their prayers, that are genuinely concerned for Damar Hamlin, I want there to be that same level of compassion for a human being if it's just a minor injury that keeps him out for one game. I mean, it shouldn't take something life-threatening for a player to nearly die on the field for it to finally click for some people that these are human beings playing a game for our entertainment. And again, this is something that not every fan has the experience or the privilege of knowing. But again, in situations like we've been in, where you've gotten to meet players, you've gotten to talk to players off the ice, you meet them in the locker room, you interview them, in some cases meeting them outside of the sport altogether. It's a completely different, it is a human being that you're speaking to. They have a personality. In 99% of cases, they're the nicest people you'll ever meet. I could give you 5 stories off the top of my head of Panthers players, Heat players, Miami Hurricanes, Cowboys, guys who have gone out of their way, just in my own personal experience that I've met and talked to, that have gone out of their way to be great human beings. And that's really the case for just about every player there is in sports. There's very few guys who are jerks outside of the sport. So it's important to remember that these are human beings, they're good people, and you have to remember the human side of things, and not just focus on what they can do for you from an entertainment perspective on the field or on the rink or on the basketball court, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great place to end this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And you said it, players don't want to play injured, which Paul Maurice, going back to the Panthers, Paul Maurice did talk a little bit about Aaron Ekblad playing through an injury as well, but didn't give too much detail about what he's playing through. So, of course, gotta sometimes take it easy on players who are just trying to do their best, like you said, for our entertainment. And for us fans, let's just try not to be selfish when it comes to what this team can do for us as far as winning. Just remember that it's secondary, especially in Damar Hamlin's situation when it's life and death. But thank you so much, Jacob, for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. A 5-3 win for the Panthers. Great night for them, and a great conversation talking about just life that's bigger than sports. So thank you once again for joining me, and let everybody know where they can follow you online.
Definitely. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8. And thanks again for having me on, and always happy to be on after a win. Love celebrating a W. I hope you enjoyed the game from the press box. It's always a nice treat to be down there.
Absolutely. And this time next week, we'll be recapping a Panthers Avalanche game, a late night edition of the show. So, Jacob, I will see you next Wednesday.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to Heidi Hallett-Cash at Locked On NHL Prospects. It's your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading up to the NHL entry draft. Locked On NHL Prospects, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.